the page, you're going to have the pedestrian quotation marks. Pedestrian has two different meanings to it, two different definitions. You could say something looks pedestrian, meaning that it looks ordinary, typical, not uncommon. Other definition for pedestrian is going to be more of a noun, where a pedestrian is a person who is walking. This is about the latter one. It's about a guy walking. So story about Leonard. So you're going to have 5 pages of Leonard walking. Leonard Mead, not Leonard Skinner. Ray Bradbury is known as a science fiction / fantasy writer. After we come back from winter break, not immediately, but in January, the next novel that we do is going to be Fahrenheit 451, also written by Ray Bradbury. So you'll notice some parallels kind of taking place between this short story and that novel when we get to it. Bradbury would consider himself to be a science fiction writer, not a fantasy writer. His argument between the two, fantasy is total make-believe, not anything that could happen. Whereas if you're writing about science fiction, you're writing about the future, you're writing about technology, machines, and things like that, but you're writing about things that could happen. So his argument with The Pedestrian is that this is a future world, because it's taking place in the year 2053, but this is something that certainly could take place. And one of the main ideas that's going to be looked at is this idea that Swiss philosopher writer has the statement that technology, the knack of so arranging the world that we don't have to experience it. So he has a negative connotation here with technology in that it's something that keeps us from being able to experience the world, especially the natural world around us. Frisch is a person who believes on people being self-reliant, taking care of themselves, and his argument would be that technology in some ways has made us have an inability to really experience the world, be able to take care of ourselves, be able to see what is truly going on. That's an idea that Bradbury kind of is going to extend with his story. He's writing this in 1950s. The big technological advancement in the 1950s is television, so that's going to be a main idea that he certainly is going to be focusing on and looking at. He certainly would have no idea about the way that technology is getting used today, in 2018. So, pedestrian, chilling portrayal of a society in which people are so isolated in their homes that a lone pedestrian is seen as a threat to the social order. So, the story is about a guy, as I said, by Leonard Mead, and Leonard simply is walking around, and that in itself is what causes things to be problematic. If you're writing about the future, but it's in a way that is a negative light, it gets referred to as being a dystopia. So the pedestrian would be a dystopian story where it's not about a perfect world, a utopia, but it's about a futuristic kind of bleak world that isn't so wonderful and cut out in a place that people would want to live. And that's what Los Angeles in 2053 is going to kind of come across as you go throughout the course of the story. When we looked at Lamb to the Slaughter, the two ideas that we really focused on was dramatic irony and situational irony. For this one, we're taking a look, not really just setting, but really more mood and tone, because those can be two things that are kind of confused from time to time. Yeah. Sure. Who ate the most food? Why?
Because I'm 92 pounds and don't eat food.
I'm telling you, when I say I
Yeah,
eat,
92.
you grow.
Sorry. So I can go home and tell my 5th grade daughter, who's 103 pounds, that you're bigger than Brendan, but he's only 92 pounds.
You don't tell your daughter that she's bigger.
It probably would.
Yeah. I heard my feelings.
What are feelings, really?
That's a big move right there.
I think Dylan's going to be the first one sprayed with water today. It's just
I think you're bringing up Captain Scott.
Nate, you're good now? All right, setting and mood. Setting, I know we're pretty good with so far as establishing time and place and the action of the story. Setting's fairly important with this one. It's tough to read this because it's November 2003. The place is a silent city, although basically Los Angeles is where we end up being. Bradbury is born in Iowa, but he moves to Los Angeles in the late 1940s, early 1950s because his main genre, as I said, is science fiction. He does a lot of screenwriting for stories that are going to turn into like little movies and TV shows. So the West Coast, Los Angeles, California, tends to be a place that he places a lot of his novels, his stories, his writings, and whatnot. So it's 2053. For us, not all that far away. It's only 35 years from now. But in 2053, this would be like 100 years in the future from when Bradbury would be writing. So it would be like you going home and writing about something that would be happening in the world 2118. So 2053. You'll be about what, 51, 52 years old? I'll be dead. Or 73.
You don't think you'll live till 73?
Hey, you can't count on it. You would have a substitute. So if I'm not here tomorrow, you're going to be wondering.
You should not come tomorrow because you make the interview like, oh my god. You think Mrs. Kane would go home too?
What's up?
You think Mrs. Kane would stay home too?
Yeah.
Should I not be here?
No, she'd be on her.
No, like if you died, we had a sub.
I can't miss
I think she'd take a day or two off.
It's like a buy one get one.
See, but I would have last year's lessons recorded that the substitute would be able to play, so it'd be like I'm still here.
No.
And you would feel warmth. All right, so what we're taking a look at, whoops, I need to go back. And this is the important thing. You don't have to write this whole thing word for word down. But we're going to be taking a look at mood. The term that mood gets confused with would be tone. When we were reading Metamorphosis, we talked about there being like a bleak tone, an isolated tone, a tone that's kind of creepy, and Kafkaesque and whatnot. Tone is what the writer's attitude is. Mood is the feeling that the reader gets from the writing. So at the very least, you would want to write down tone, attitude of the author. This is what the author is trying to get across. Mood, though, would be what you take from the story. More often than not, those two things tend to go hand in hand, but you sometimes can have a little bit of a disconnect where the tone could be, the intent could be one thing, but the mood is portrayed as something else, and the reader doesn't necessarily take it the same way that the writer wanted it to. Tone describes the writing overall. Mood of a piece of writing can change kind of throughout it. So, you could have different parts where the mood maybe becomes a little bit more humorous. Land of the Slaughter would be a pretty good example of it. The tone, we were identifying for the most part as being sinister when we were doing that constructive response. Yet there were parts within the story where you could go, the mood is a little comical as the police officers are eating the leg of lamb, wondering where the murder weapon would be and saying it could be right underneath our nose. The overall tone could still be sinister, even though parts of what we were reading about, you could go, that's kind of humorous, that's kind of silly, that's kind of fun. So mood could be certainly something as simple as being depressed, could be sad, but it also could be a lot of other terms that we're going to get into here in a little bit. But the big thing, tone, author's attitude, mood, that's what the reader is taking from the story overall. Setting certainly can help create a mood or atmosphere, and some overtones that can certainly kind of affect our feeling based on the location and whatnot. So the setting for our story is going to be on a dark, cold night in November of 2053, the pedestrian, Leonard Mead, walks alone throughout the city. The streets and freeways are deserted. Dark, tomb-like homes line the streets. So it's in the future. He's walking alone throughout the city where it's already deserted and dark. So the fact that he's alone, deserted, dark, kind of gives you a mood that this is going to be a little bit more, not to use the word dark again, but somber. It's certainly not going to be too upbeat. If there's any doubt, what word in that fourth line reinforces that this is not a positive atmosphere, a positive mood that the reader is supposed to get from it? How are the homes described? Tomb-like. So it's like he's walking in a cemetery. Tomb-like is going to make you think that, all right, they could be empty, that anyone who's there is already deceased, soulless, things of that nature, where it's not going to have a positive connotation. So when you come in tomorrow, I'm not here, people get worried, it'll be kind of tomb-like. Yeah, I still would be. Sure. What is next Friday? There would be some kind of omen that would make you go, like Thursday night, you'd be sitting at home and magically the vocabulary just kind of starts to come out of your book.
Yo, I already have that problem with ghosts, okay? It's scary. Like, okay, I'm going into deep. Yeah, no, listen. I'll put my pen away. I was up at my friend's camp, and I was like, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts. All of a sudden, the stick that he was using that poked the fire caught on fire. They shouldn't have done that. It was really scary. Then, later on that night, I was talking to his dad.
Do you ever think that maybe the problem is you only weigh 92 pounds?
And
So,
ghosts don't like me. And
well,
then,
no,
Elvis
so like
comes.
you need more weight to sustain yourself,
So the ghosts are
so
looking
that
out
your
for
mind
me.
is starting to play tricks on you because it's like there's not enough.
I'm malnourished.
Yeah.
So thick, so like, right? And the stick that back spontaneously combusted. Or it was already in the fire.
All right, tomorrow, Brendan, after your reading check quiz, we're going to ask you to rewrite all of the mood words that would show up, and you'll be able to come up with this list. I don't expect you to memorize this list, but when it comes to mood, people will go happy, sad, good, bad. The important thing is certainly with mood, you can have a lot of different terms coming up. And I know the ones up here at the top are getting grayed out for whatever reason. But, you know, again, go with the most recent thing that we read when it comes to the metamorphosis. You know, rather than being sad, you could say it's melancholic. You know, or that you have person who feels rejected, somber, stressed, could be kind of tense, terrifying in some ways. If you take a look at what we have within Lamb to the Slaughter, you certainly could still argue that it is maybe kind of glooming and foreboding that he is ultimately killed. But at the same time, you could have some things where it ends up being kind of silly, even though the term's not showing up on there. But silly, comic, you know, even funny could end up being a term. So I don't want you to think of it only being good, bad, happy, sad, but there can be a whole bunch of different kind of mood and tone words that certainly we'll use. And these will be things that we'll kind of come back to as we describe mood, tone when it comes to the story. When you finish reading the story and listening to it with the video that you're going to be taking a look at, you want to certainly kind of consider what the author's purpose is. And there's a couple things that you could certainly pull from. It may be to share a feeling or experience. It could be to recreate a world of the writer's own making. It also could be to persuade the reader to accept the writer's view on some issue. This would be the main one that Bradbury's probably taking a look at, because he is looking at the future being a dystopia, that technology is going to be problematic for us. That's not to say that he thinks all medical advances, all technological advances would be bad, but he certainly feels that there is people who are putting too much emphasis, too much time into technology and forgetting about the world that is around them. And that's stuff that you hear parents and educators and other talk about all the time. Probably today, not so much with TV, but what devices get mentioned as to this is going to be the problem. We don't have to call them smartphones anymore. Pretty much just phones. But it could be calculators with a math class. It certainly would be used to smartphones, screen time, and people talk about blue light and it. Who couldn't sleep last night? Tommy. It was all that blue light from that screen that was making it unable for you to be able to sleep.
My mom says it's different generations.
I like how you did the voice change there. Because your mom sounds exactly like that.
Justin's mom's like,
So what? So what's your argument with like the different generations?
She says that they didn't have phones, TVs, and all that.
That's a lie.
That's what she says.
We had, how old's your mom, roughly? Okay. It's her mom.
Yeah, let's not
Sure.
talk share.
We had phones, they were just this size.
Are you talking about like the 80s?
No, this was 90s. Like we had cell phones, like you could get a cell phone probably, they were more common, I would say 95, 96. Like I started college in 98. Not everyone had cell phone, but it wasn't uncommon to have one. But it was basically the size of what, twice the size of what like a cordless phone at home would be
I
now.
don't know why, but that just thinking of a cordless phone reminds me of Night at the Roxbury. You've seen that movie?
My mom uses her old free phone.
Or you give it to a 3-year-old to keep them occupied because of the buttons and whatnot that we go for.
I mean,
But
if
no,
that falls on a baby,
when it,
It is a break.
a brick phone is not that's heavy. It just doesn't have the keyboard to think with it. But from the generational thing, it's not so much that probably using the phone, because I'm sure your mom uses smartphone. I use smartphone, in pocket right now. But I think what adults probably get more, I don't know if concern's the right word, but complain about would be the whole communication, conversation standpoint, where rather than Nate talking to me, he's going to send me a text that could say, "Hi, how are you? Missed you in class yesterday. Are you alive?" At which point, if I am alive,
32 minutes ago.
what's my response?
Yeah.
No.
I might go, yeah, or I could even just go, thumbs up.
And maybe
Everything's good.
See, I've never used an emoji.
I'm always open when I text people.
You do or you don't?
I've never.
My dad uses an animated.
If someone hits me with a thumbs up, I'm gonna.
Oh my god, so is my dad.
I actually.
You need to sign up for reminders so I can send you a thumbs up.
You're getting like
Alright, let's not talk about
Oh
road
my
sharing.
God, my
though.
dad
Talk about
How many, and I don't have a number, so I can't say that you're exactly right or wrong. How many TVs do you think are in the United States right now? And going like actual TV, so phone does not count, tablet does not count, but how many like TVs?
Like a million.
Either. So it could be a flat screen, could be an old tube TV, but it is still a TV. I want, hold on. I want like actual numbers, so I hear people saying stuff, Mark.
Are you counting the ones in like stores and factories?
Like
The people own 300,000. Gavin, you're saying a billion?
It's definitely 1 billion.
It's like 100.
I feel like it's 4 billion.
No, 1,000.
I'm guessing 5 billion.
Not in the United States.
Mark, what was your number?
That's not
300,000. Okay.
It's like 9 billion.
Josh, how many? Listen up. How many TVs are in your house? Hold on. I know it's tough to figure out.
Like 3 or 4.
3 or 4. You have
But there,
TVs
we
in
have,
the house.
we have like box ones. We have like box ones.
Yeah, that counts. That's a TV.
No, just count.
All right, so hold on. Listen up. So TVs, things that you plug into the wall. It's going to show you programming. Could be a smart TV. Could be grandma, whomever's old TV that has like the digital adapter with bunny ears. But Josh is going 3 or 4 TVs. You're going 4 or 5 TVs. Anyone have more than 5 TVs in a house?
There's some that box
Yeah.
So like not being used, but were. How many do you think?
I don't know. My not my basement, my attic in my grandma's house.
White and rich. I have 7.
I didn't know you meant the ones that are being used. I have like TV in my bathroom.
I have her.
So you still have it. So 4, maybe 4 being used, 8 or 9 total in the house.
We have 6 being used and 3 non.
No, I want
So 9.
No idea.
We have 3 being used. That's it. Yeah,
So you guys are so
In our household, so there's 4 of us. So we have the 7-year-old, 11-year-old, and then Mrs. Kane and I. There is, and we don't, I would say, have too many, but then you kind of start adding them. We have one in our main family room. That would be the larger one. But then downstairs in the game room, there's the TV that's plugged in. It's not in a box, but it's kind of like the ones that would be in Mia's grandmother's attic. It doesn't really get used. So we got a TV down there. Then there's a TV in my bedroom. The kids want TVs in their room. Because I'm a parent, I say,
Okay.
just go down.
Yeah, I love everything.
But I also have a TV on the back porch.
What? That's
So
so
the-
necessary.
That's the way to go.
So that when I'm grilling in the summer, I just look like
Yeah,
this,
it's like-
and I can still see the TV through the windows on the porch.
That's.
Or if I want to watch like a college football game in the fall, I can be on the porch without being outside and you feel like you're there. There's also a TV in the garage.
That's so
What? Don't laugh.
easy to watch TV while you walk.
Well, because if I'm sanding or spraying or spraying some kind of project, I can have TV going on there as well. So we would have like 5 TVs, and then I think there's 2 other TVs that are just kind of boxed up somewhere. When TVs first start becoming semi-popular, so like World War II era, right after World War II, in 1947, and keep in mind, U.S. population right now is like 300 million. In the late 1940s, it's about 150 million. In 1947, there are 44,000 TVs in the country.
Not a lot.
It's not a lot. Like if you were to, so with about 150 million, you're looking at like 1 TV for a little over every 3,000 people. So it's not a lot of TVs. But in a short amount of time, in 3 years, in 1950, so end of World War I or end of World War II in 1947, beginning of 1950s, which is kind of like a consumerism time, the TVs has jumped up to 6 million. So you've gone from 1 TV for about every 300,000 to this would be about when the story is being written, where we're looking at technologies maybe being problematic. It has jumped up from 44,000 to 6 million. So in 1950, and keep in mind, you have like maybe 3 channels on the TV, you're already up to 6 million. 1960, so this is after the story takes place, but this would be like the generation that Bradbury's trying to touch onto. There are now 60 million TVs in circulation, which would, at the time, that would be about 1 TV for every 3 people, which pretty much means that almost every house would have at least 1 TV in 1960. I don't think there is a number floating out there today as to say how many TVs exist, whether it be 1 billion or 4 billion, have no idea. There was data from 2013 that was saying there's about TVs in 115 million households. So 115 million households in the United States have TVs. If you have, say 3 TVs, 4 TVs, certainly that number is getting up into the 400, maybe 500 million. Whether or not we've actually hit 1 billion at this point, I don't know. Now, if you were to say how many screens exist in the United States, where you start adding phones and tablets and all that stuff, then certainly that number becomes, much larger. And how many phones are in circulation? I have absolutely no idea.
Like 6.
Well, would you say every student, or like say 90%, 95%? Well, you have iPads, yeah. So like so by the time you'd be a senior, assume school population's about the same, you'd have like 1,300 iPads, plus then whatever phones would be going on top of it. So over 2,000, certainly, yeah, plus laptops. So this doesn't mean, therefore, that everything that Bradbury writes about you have to agree with and go, yeah, TVs are a problem. But much like the way that there's that generational gap with cell phones and how they're being used, there's a generational gap with TVs and certainly how they are being used and maybe how people are relying on them too much. if the main character is an outcast because he's walking outside, what does that imply that everyone else would be doing? At home, inside, essentially watching TV.
Do you ever tell your kids, like, that you didn't have phones?
Do you?
They're not ready for that.
Well, my kids don't have phones yet. So there's now, so there's not that, there hasn't been the dad, I need a phone kind of thing. Not yet, yeah, it's coming. Addie's in 5th grade. Probably by the time she's getting to, like, at some point in middle school, it's probably going to be a reality in the sense that practices, activities, and whatnot that she's involved in, that, yeah, I'm going to need to, like, either contact her. She has an iPod, so she can be, like, on Wi-Fi and shoot me a text, but I can't, or she can't text me from the bus stop or anything like that. Sadie has a Kindle. She hasn't had the Kindle for like 3 months because it got taken away from her for her being a brat. So maybe we'll start looking at it later. But
So like I have to look at my Xbox and I'd be like, man, this sucks. So it's in my room. Do you give your kids
but like there's, I would say there is the generational thing when it comes to like entertainment, because right now the amount of toys and stuff that they have like is way more than I ever had, you know, in my lifetime. And they play with something for 2 minutes and then they're entirely done with it. So that generational conversation happens, but it hasn't gotten to the TV era quite yet. So, Jack, were you asking something?
Do you give your kids like screen time, like you're only allowed on for so many hours?
Yes.
My brother's
Yeah, I can't handle
he has
that.
a
My parents
he has
never
an
did that
Xbox
to me.
and
I
a
would turn
PlayStation.
that
Freaking age.
I'm never on.
Well, and I mean, yeah, and that'll be one of the things that probably not with this story, but when we get to Fahrenheit 451, we'll take a look at as to what's being proactive, what's being reactive, what's being protective, what's kind of overstepping the bounds. At this point, we're not done yet. At this point, I don't trust Addie. Not that I don't trust what she's going to do. I don't trust her judgment as to, yes, this would be a good app, no, this would be a bad app, and stuff
My
like
parents
that.
didn't even give me like any of that stuff. So I was like,
Who's like here?
Well,
I had a flip phone when I was like 11.
I had a phone in middle school.
Well, and what's probably different for me and my kids is the last 16 years, every day I go to work, I'm surrounded by kids, most of which turn out okay. Some of which, we won't name names, don't. And so, you know, like, you talk about the whole bullying thing, cyber media, and all that stuff, you know, you do see where people get a little too attached to it, and some don't. I think, I would like to think we're maybe a little bit more aware about some of the pros, but some of the cons that can happen with it as well. I don't know. All right, so when it comes to technology, what we're looking at here within the pedestrian, Bradbury's trying to persuade readers to accept his views on the isolating effect of technology. So look for passages, and again, you're reading this, you're also going to be watching and listening to this that would directly express those kind of opinions. So much like he had tomb-like, there's loaded words that can certainly carry some emotional overtones that are going to go beyond the literal meaning. When it comes to his description of the main character's house, he describes Leonard's house as being brightly lit, it's illuminated, it's square, it's warm. Some of these words you take a look at and go, there's not a whole lot of big meaning to square, but it's a warm, kind of cozy, illuminated environment. Other houses aren't going to be described in the same way, but things like warmth suggest, you know, hope, solidarity, that there's good things that are going to happen. The other homes, we already know, it's a dark street, it's somber, they're described as being tombs, so something that is brightly illuminated and warm is going to be a stark contrast from the other homes that Leonard is going to be walking around. And his description of the setting is going to express this as well. Mead walks through a landscape in which the houses are compared to dark tombs. The people sit like they are dead. He'll describe them as phantoms, essentially ghost shadows. The light from their TVs flicker over the gray and untouchable faces as they're just basically zombies who are watching the TV. So the TV's getting the brunt of the attack from Bradbury at this time. But again, that's going to be because that's the thing that's generational at the time. So a mood of death and despair is what he wants the reader to ultimately take from it. I'm not worried about us doing a journal for this right now. Is make sure you go to Google Classroom. Make sure you go here at the top with the Ed Puzzle. Click on the Ed Puzzle link. That is going to send you right into the video that you're going to watch. It's a 12-minute video with you answering the questions. You're probably taking a look at about 15 minutes of your time. The video, again, it's just a reading of the story. Have your book with you so that you can take a look at the words that are being referenced. That will ultimately certainly help you when it comes to the reading check quiz that we're going to want. Tomorrow, reading check quiz, you'll get that active reading packet, kind of like what we did with Land of the Slaughter. We'll be able to work on that in class, and then we'll go over it on the topic. Right. Go home, turn your TVs. If you don't have one in the garage, I highly suggest you do it in the garage. We can hear it.
I have a couch.
Evan, how many TVs do you have in your house? Three? That's not bad. I have 4.
I bet whenever we do, we'll get like, it's not gonna get like, but and I would probably, rather than go with like family playing with dad and all that stuff, I'd probably put on like where you get so many minutes.